Coming up, SpaceX hard lands.
China lands hard.
And Scott Manley joins us to talk about Kerbal space program. Stay tuned. Season 8 of Tomorrow begins right now. Welcome to Tomorrow, episode 8.01. That's right, season 8, episode 1 for Saturday, January 10th, 2015. My name is Benjamin Higginbotham, and we have got an action-packed episode for you today. Now, before we get started, a huge thank you to all of the patrons of Tomorrow who have helped to make this specific episode happen. These are the people who've contributed at least $10 to this specific episode. The list keeps getting longer and longer and longer, and it is really amazing that you guys have helped make this show what it is. All the new lights, all the new stuff, because of these people right here. If you'd like to become a citizen of Tomorrow, you can get more information over at patreon.com/TMRO. All right, let's go ahead and get straight into it. One of the most requested guests that we had in 2014 was actually a very famous YouTube Kerbal space programmer named Scott Manley, and he is joining us live right now via Skype. Scott, welcome to Tomorrow.
Hello! How are you, Ben?
I'm doing fantastic. So you are, according to your Facebook profile, you are a Scotsman, astronomer, hacker, gamer, DJ, and video maker.
Yeah, lost soul, basically. I do a lot of random things.
But the thing you are best known for, at least in the space community, is Kerbal Space Program. Now, before we get too much into what you've done with your videos online, for anyone who doesn't know, can you describe what is Kerbal Space Program, or KSP?
Kerbal Space Program is a space rocket simulator, which is a little light-hearted in places, but is physically correct in every other respect. So when your rocket is falling out of the sky, disintegrating, undergoing rapid unplanned disassembly, you will have a little green man in the corner of your screen screaming at you.
It's hilarious and adorable to play. And actually, there is a question that I was going to ask a little bit later on, but I'm going to bring it up now because you mentioned the Kerbal in the corner. What is it? The funded Kerbal genocide sim.
Yes.
What is there an inside joke there? Because I saw that, I'm like, okay, that's got to be a joke that I'm just not getting.
Basically, here's the thing. The failures in rockets are spectacular, as you know. However, obviously, they are not happy experiences. But in Kerbal Space Program, they're spectacular and fun. So, you know, I think the wonderful thing about Kerbal Space Program is failure is its own reward. When you have a spectacular explosion, you get a little smile on your face, and then you go back and try to make it better. So yeah, a lot of Kerbals end up dying.
So all right, how did you get started playing KSP, Kerbal Space Program, and then how did you get started uploading that to a YouTube channel?
Well, you see, when I found out about Kerbal Space Program, I thought, great, here's something where my astronomy, education can actually be useful in a video game. And I just started playing it. I had a lot of fun. This was before there was any instrumentation. So getting into orbit required actual calculations on paper to figure out whether you were in orbit or not. And I noticed some guides on the forums that people and the video guides, people had posted explaining the best way to get into orbit. I noticed people arguing whether it was even possible to get into orbit. And I kind of get frustrated arguing with them in the forums. So I made all these videos just to say, look, this is how you get into orbit. This is how orbits work, and then did a bunch of other stuff. So I kind of became the basic guide on how to get into orbit. And then I stopped for a while, but then people kept asking me to come back and do more.
So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but if you've been doing it for so long that you had to do it on paper, how long have you been doing this for then?
I think I started Kerbal when it came out, but I can't remember if it was 2011 or 2012 now. It's that long ago. It was several years ago, and it was the summer. And yeah, I think it was actually 2011 now I think about it. And I just made this, very simple guide. So basically, since the very first version appeared, which had some interesting flaws, such as you could attach things on the side, but you couldn't control symmetry. So it was sheer luck if you manage to get your boosters lined up.
That's awesome. All right, so actually, one thought that comes to mind is if it started off where you had to write everything down on paper, it feels a little bit like the actual space program, right? When they first started off, they were using slide rules. They didn't have big computers to tell them whether they were in orbit. They just kind of had to figure it out. And now it's fairly automated.
Right, but I mean, in their case, the consequences for failure were a little bigger. In my case, I could afford to experiment repeatedly and actually figure out how massive the planet was, because we didn't even know that early on. We didn't know how big the planet was, how massive it was, and once we figured that out, we could figure out our orbital velocities. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely become a more sophisticated game over time, which including such things like the maneuver node functionality, which lets you suggest a maneuver and it'll tell you what the new orbit will be and whether it will intersect things or not. So it's definitely become a more complicated thing, but there's still a lot of, feeling around in the dark from new players for sure.
So I'm going to have our director call up. There was an XKCD comic not that long ago. I think you know exactly the one that I'm talking about. And here's what it looks like. Basically, it says how well you understand orbital mechanics, high school physics degree, went to NASA, and then Kerbal Space Program right-hand side and just straight up and to the right. How true is that? How if you want to learn orbital mechanics, how good is Kerbal Space Program at teaching you that?
Well, so Kerbal Space Program is using a single body, gravitating body approximation. So it doesn't deal with things like weak stability boundaries. Back when I did my research, I did 10 years of astronomy, basically, including a lot of postgraduate work on dynamics, which got into some really deep n-body systems. But it doesn't get that far. But what it does teach you is everyday working understanding of orbital mechanics. And I like to talk about, I think it's Gemini 4 was the first attempt by NASA to rendezvous in space, where they launched the capsule and then they tried to turn it around and rendezvous with the booster. And they then proceeded to spend about 2 orbits just flying circles around this booster, unable to get close. And that was because the pilots, while they knew about this stuff, they didn't have a kind of working everyday appreciation for orbital mechanics. So they would burn towards it, and then that would mean they would fall down. So they'd burn again, and then they would fly around it. Kerbal Space Program, by letting you do this on an everyday basis and by requiring you to do this, it teaches you how to perform rendezvous. There's 10-year-old kids that can do what it took, Buzz Aldrin's PhD thesis to work out. And that's simply because it provides everyday experience.
That's pretty awesome. And it's kind of cool that there's a game that's fun to play that can be used as an educational tool for everyone else.
Yeah, it's absolutely stunning. And I am... The best thing about doing this, it's very nice to have, hundreds of thousands of people that occasionally watch videos, but the best thing is that I get emails all the time from kids that are, they basically decided they're going to learn physics or engineering or something because of either my video or these games. And, that's changing the world in a very small way, towards more science and engineering. It's great.
We let the community of tomorrow know that you were coming on a week or 2 ago and said, hey, if you've got questions for Manley, I just like calling you Manley. It's pretty awesome.
Real name.
We were talking before the show. I think you should start a science show because you actually do science videos on your channel as well. It's not just Kerbal Space Program. It needs to be called Manley Science, and you need to be dressed in a lumberjack outfit. I mean, just full on, just like
maybe a kilt. How about that?
That works too. That works too. We asked the community what they would like to know from you, and so here are a few questions. This one comes from Greg on our Facebook channel. He asks, "Would you consider having a rocket first stage land back on a small floating platform in the game?" Gee, I wonder why this is the first question in this particular show. If so, what odds would you give the Kerbals of being successful?
Well, I will say on my first attempt, I successfully put the rocket down soft in the ocean, but then it fell over and broke up. Completely manually. Yeah, a couple of nights ago, I was trying this repeatedly, and without decent instrumentation, I was unable to get close to the platform. So I ended up playing something else instead. I think a large part of it is lacking instrumentation to make the early course corrections, because as you know, course corrections early on need less maneuvering, whereas the closer you get to your target, the bigger the maneuvers you need to make. So, yeah, we're lacking instrumentation for that kind of pinpoint touchdown right now.
And the bigger the maneuver, the more fuel you need, and that creates issues all the way throughout the entire build process.
Right, yes.
Oh, that was it. All right, moving on. Dado, this will be number 2. This comes from our Twitter channel. This is from Kerbal Essences. Asks, can Kerbal Space... I'm sorry. Hey, Scott, what inspired you to post your first video, and was it on YouTube or somewhere else?
Well, actually, I should immediately back up and say I think Kerbal Essences actually managed to land a rocket on a barge, by the way. So mad props to him. I think there is somebody that managed. I think it was Kerbal Essences. But funnily enough, my first really popular video was the asteroid discovery map. I basically took the catalog of every single known asteroid and figured out their discovery dates and plotted their positions in real time and then ran the clock forward to show the discovery positions.
I think we've shown that on this show. Like, it turns into this huge grid of like blobs, doesn't it?
Yeah, but the best thing about that is it shows you where they were, so you can see the discovery patterns, and you see spikes, for example, when the bunch of people started looking for satellites around Jupiter after the Voyager pass, right? Or they were trying to refine the orbits, for example. So you can see these patterns, and you can see whys with its different discovery pattern. That wasn't my first video, but that was my first big one. My first video was actually posted to a completely different website that I worked at. I actually used to work on a website that was a video upload sharing site, and my first YouTube video was actually posted to YouTube to show how poor YouTube was compared to the site I was working on. It's now out of business. All
right. Next up, Minustar, I think, is how you pronounce this one. It said, can Kerbal Space Program be used to educate people about space tech and challenges? And are there ever enough boosters?
Well, I think we've already answered that question. It does act as a great platform for experiencing. Obviously, it skips over some of the more detailed things, but people add in some of the more, bigger problems or more less well-known problems, let's say. For example, fuel flow is something that's not well modeled, but there are mods to actually require Ullage thrusters and everything in the game. So, yeah, I mean, it does provide a platform for learning all of this stuff. And aerodynamics as well is something it does pretty well. Famously teaching people that if you put the center of mass behind the center of lift, then you're going to have a spacecraft that just flips around and doesn't fly.
And so, speaking to some of those you can actually mod the game and add different things. Icarus Factor asks, what do you think about multiplayer Kerbal Space Program's current edition and future direction of?
Well, it's always been nice, but it's never quite worked properly for me. And it's always been rather unstable, so I've kind of stayed away from it. But I do think there have been some great projects. My favorite multiplayer projects have been where people just got together and said, let's build a space station. And they all just each send the save file on, and each person bolts a giant bit onto the space station. You get this horrible space shanty town, which, everybody then celebrates when we cast it into the atmosphere and watch it break up.
I feel like there's a lot of celebration that happened. Like, I did it, or it exploded, happening inside a Kerbal Space Program. Let's move on to, let's just do a couple more here. This one, Dada, this will be number 7. It's from Niels, and this is from Facebook, which is, how did you get so inspired, and how do you think the new generation is getting inspired of space travel and all space geekery?
How did I get inspired? I get inspired when I was 4 years old and my dad took me to see Star Wars. And I've been a space nut ever since. And, I went and studied astronomy at university when I should have been doing something more practical. I've just never stepped away from it. I've always been a big proponent of, Earth defense from, asteroids as well. So that's I've kind of always kept with that. Yeah, I mean, it's largely just being I don't know. I guess I wonder, how can you not be inspired by space, right? How can you not be inspired by the hugeness of the universe and our epic but tiny attempts, our epic attempts to get even just into orbit? How can that not inspire you? I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think we're all of like minds here. It's amazing how many people actually do question the space program and don't actually understand why we're going out there. Maybe playing a game like Kerbal Space Program would help them. All right. This one's from Oisin, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Kelly, this is from Facebook. Says, if you were to get a chance to go on a round trip to Mars, what music would you consider essential to listening to bring along?
Mars, Pump Up the Volume would be a good one. Just jumped into my head there. Obviously, The Planet's sweet. Left Field's first album, Leftism, that would be pretty much essential. I would probably just bring a ginormous iPod and play it forever. I have, you probably can't see it in the background, but in the distant background there on the very furthest wall, there's about 9,000 records that I own on vinyl. Oh, man. I'm a bit of a record nerd. Oh, God.
You should post that collection online. I'm sure people would like to see that.
Yeah, I did do a video showing a choice few examples. Boards of Canada, lots of Boards of Canada. Dave Van Cowboy, absolutely, for a re-entry would be great.
All right, I think the last question, and this one gets, we normally don't travel into this too much because it brings out a slightly odd crowd. And this is from Procrastinator Sam. And it says, what is your opinion on the, I'm going to add the word, alleged moon landing conspiracy?
The short one is, what conspiracy? The long one is, I think it needs to be, dealt with by a comedy movie or something that mocks the whole process. I don't know. Conspiracies grow out of very little evidence, I think.
And then the hard part is you disprove them, and then they just move on to something else, and it's never ending. It's like they've chosen what they want to believe. Evidence be damned. So yes. It's annoying.
Yeah, as I said, I think I'd love to see a movie set in the 60s in NASA where the engineers start out getting ordered to fake the moon landings, and halfway through building the giant rocket to fake the moon landings, they realize, hey, we could just actually do them cheaper. And have them like secretly building this actual moon lander in, while there's the government monitor that's trying to keep costs low, telling them not to do it, so they're doing it right under his nose.
Yeah, all right. So we'll end on that slightly strange conspiracy note. Scott, thank you so much for taking time out of your Saturday to join us live. It's been a real pleasure. Hopefully you won't be a stranger to the show. And for everyone else, actually, where can you have actually? I do have to ask this last question. Your YouTube channel. And Dada, we have a screenshot of the YouTube channel because I'm not going to be able to repeat this. Where does that name come from?
Oh, that was back literally 20 years ago. I was trying to register a username and I wanted to come up with something original. And I couldn't remember how to spell syzygy, which is, of course, a natural conjunction in the solar system. So that's what it was. And since nobody else ever uses that account name, it became my account name.
It makes it slightly difficult to actually promote it other than creating a link in the show notes.
Syzygy. Yeah, nobody can pronounce it.
We will do that. We'll add that as the show notes. That's where you can get your YouTube channel. Anywhere else people can find you online for more information on KSP or astronomy?
Yeah, just easy to search for Scott Manley. I think right now YouTube is the only place that I'm really spending time. And Twitter. I spend a lot of time on Twitter due to my job taking me there a lot.
Well, I really do look forward to Manly Science. I hope you do that. I think that would be awesome. I want to see you in a kilt doing science. That just seems like an epic show. All right, thank you so much for taking your time out of your Saturday. And when we come back, space news from these last few weeks. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Look into her face, determination in her eyes. She won't give up or quit or fall for little fashion lies. Filled with some expectation, this girl's a fascination. Nothing in her way will keep her from her destination. 'Cause she's fire walking, she's fire walking. When it's hot, she keeps on moving, the heat keeps on improving. Yeah, she's fire walking, she's fire.
and welcome back to Tomorrow. Joining me is the beautiful, lovely, wonderful, and talented Carrie Ann Higginbotham, and we are also joined live via Skype by Space Mike, and we're going to be talking about space news, which will be brought to you by the patrons of Tomorrow. These are the people who've contributed at least, patrons of Tomorrow. These are the people who contributed at least $5 to this specific episode. You can find out more information on how you can become a citizen of Tomorrow and contribute over at patreon.com/TMRO. All right, let's go ahead and bring Space Mike in and get started. I did want to say the last show we did at the end of 2014, I talked about Ariane 6 and Falcon 9, and I compared the amount of payload they could bring up, and I did a total noob mistake. I was not paying attention to where the payload was going. So, and I know better. I don't know why I did this. I compared Ariane 6's geotransfer orbit capabilities to Falcon 9's low Earth orbit capabilities. That is clearly wrong. So I neglected to put the actual correct numbers in my rundown. So I'll get that to you guys sometime. We'll put it in the show notes so you get a fair comparison of GTO to GTO numbers, because that's not fair to Ariane. You got to compare the apples to apples, as it were. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Space Knight, let's bring you in. I believe this would be the news of the week. Let's talk some CRS-5, shall we?
How's it going, everyone?
Ooh. Doing great. Yeah, this is going to be a fun show. All right. Tell us about what SpaceX is doing.
I'll just start. Well, hello, everybody. 2015 has started off to a very exciting start. SpaceX has successfully launched their Falcon 9 rocket for the CRS-5 mission to the International Space Station today. They launched that just this morning, January 10th, on this Saturday, and it was a completely successful launch, and they were able to deliver, well, it hasn't arrived yet, but the Dragon capsule is going to be delivering the CATS, which is the Cloud Aerosol Detection System, which is going to be set to the International Space Station and will help to take lots of those measurements, as well as 2 small satellites that will also be launched. And on this launch, this was the first time that SpaceX wanted to try to attempt to launch on their floating barge that they would have out in the Pacific Ocean. And this was very nervous test, because it was the first time ever trying to do this. They had done several soft touchdowns, which essentially means coming down to almost zero before touching the water. And they had done that successfully, but now this was the first time to do a pinpoint landing. And to be able to land on this tiny barge, I mean, it's good size, but for coming out of orbit to try this tiny barge is just crazy. And a few things happened. First of all, they were able to successfully target that barge and were able to hit it, essentially, but they were not able to do a soft touchdown. We know at this point why it was not able to make a soft touchdown. Whatever anomalies occurred, for all I know, it ran out of fuel. However, the barge was not destroyed. There was some damage that would need to be repaired before their next attempt. As far as I know, the first stage is not recoverable. And so, things went pretty good for. I think that it is a success in and of itself that the rocket actually was able to target the barge, and even though it crashed into it, they still were able to make that pinpoint landing, and know that software and that technology works to be able to hopefully in the future have a soft touchdown with a pinpoint landing like this. So congratulations, SpaceX.
Yeah, that was really cool. That was a lot of fun to watch. So thanks. Stay on the line. We're going to be using Space Mike, assuming we can fix the bandwidth issues, for the remainder of the year, not just for SpaceX news, but for other news, because he is so passionate and excited about this stuff. So we'll keep him on the line and keep going down the rundown. Next up is the Government Accountability Office. The Sierra Nevada Corporation filed a complaint basically saying, hey, NASA, you're supposed to give these contracts, these crew contracts, to the most appropriate companies, and we don't think you've done that. And this is for the Commercial Crew Transportation contracts. And so they filed a complaint with the Government Accountability Office, and a decision on Monday, January 5th was made, which upheld NASA's decision for $6.8 billion of contract awards to both Boeing and SpaceX. So basically, the GAO, the U.S. Government Accountability Office, said no. What they did was correct. And basically, the quote is, the GAO disagreed with Sierra Nevada's arguments about NASA's evaluation and found no undue emphasis on NASA's consideration of each offender's proposed schedule and likelihood to achieve crew transportation system certification not later than 2017. Now, that doesn't mean that Dream Chaser is out forever. It just means that right now it's not going to be sending crew to the International Space Station. They are going to try to send cargo to the International Space Station and actually give it a future life potentially with non-U.S. customers as well. So hopefully Sierra Nevada continues the funding of the Dream Chaser, because I'm actually a huge fan of the little mini shuttle. I think it's really freaking cool. But yeah, so there you go. That was the latest out of the GAO. Basically, Boeing and SpaceX, good to continue on, good to continue commercial transport to the International Space Station.
Total underdog move, though. I mean, they gotta try. Right?
They gotta try.
I mean,
yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. We had a launch. I'm not sure. Besides CRS-5, in case anybody was paying attention, the Astra 2 launches on top of a Proton rocket out of the Baikonur Cosmodrome. This is the very end of December. It was December 27th of 2014 at 21:37 UTC from Kazakhstan. I believe we've got some footage.
We have ignition. We have liftoff of an ILS Proton from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan with the Astra 2G satellite on board. About 10 seconds after liftoff, the vehicle does a roll maneuver to alter the attitude.
So the Astra 2G is a commercial communications satellite with a 15-year mission linking Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. It has 62 KU band transponders and 4 KA band transponders and one aptly named X-band communications package, which is for the government of Luxembourg. They're actually, this is sort of just a placeholder. They're just keeping the frequency open for military comm satellites. It's going to be in an undisclosed geostationary orbit until it reaches its final destination around June of 2015.
Speaking of awesome launches, we're going to toss it back to space, Mike.
Pretty.
Talk about the Angara 5 launch. At the end of the year, we actually, in our rundown, we talked about Angara 1 and how awesome it was, and then like this moderately surprise launch, Angara 5. What happened there, Mike?
Oh man, Angara 5 is, it was just a test launch. There wasn't an actual payload, it was just a dummy payload. But this launch has so many implications. Angara 5 is essentially, the first stage of it is similar to the Angara 1 that was launched at the end of last year. Has the same engine, the RD-191, which is just a one-nozzle version of the two-nozzle version that flies on the Atlas V, the RD-181. Anyway, with this Angara 5, it has one single core stage that the thrust is just slightly less, and then it has 4 boosters that are essentially more Angara 1s. And so with the 5 combined boosters and the one in the middle burning at just a little bit less thrust than the others, they do the similar type of staging that they do with their Soyuz rocket, where the 4 boosters will stage away and then the middle booster of the first stage will use up the rest of its fuel, and then the upper stage will lift the payload the rest of the way into orbit. And with this, you might not know this, but there is another space race that has been going on between NASA and Roscosmos once again, and that and with this test, Russia has essentially won. The Angara 5 is only going to be capable of lifting 22 tons into orbit, whereas the SLS, which is still just in the design phase, there's lots of tests that are going to be going on, but as a complete rocket, it's nowhere near ready for a test flight yet. The SLS is supposed to be able to do 40 tons once it enters into service. The Angara 5, with this successful test mission that was able to get this dummy payload into orbit, and not only any orbit, into a geosynchronous orbit that eventually moved to a graveyard orbit so that they weren't clogging up anything or causing any new debris. This launch is going to change everything for Russia. With it, they're going to be able to replace their Soyuz rocket. They're going to be able to replace their Proton rocket, which has had so many problems. And all of their future plans that they have are going to be enabled thanks to the Angara rocket family.
And moving right along with rocket launches, because we have even more, well, we're off for a little while. We had the Resurs P2 aboard a Soyuz rocket. Here's the launch coverage. And it looks like it's on fire. I know it's not, but it looks like it's on fire. This launched Friday, December 26th at 1855 Coordinated Universal Time from Baikonur Cosmodrome. It's the satellite, it's the Resource P2. It's designed for a 5-year mission. It's actually kind of like 4 satellites in one. It's got multiple cameras, an astrophysics science experiment, and a communications package which is going to be used to track ships. Some of the different things it's going to do is actually going to, that high-resolution camera is going to collect imagery of Earth's surface. They can use that to distribute to the Russian government agencies for agriculture, environment, emergency situations, meteorology, stuff like that. Then there's also that science experiment. That is a plasma physics experiment, which is going to seek out signs of exotic antimatter and dark matter in the cosmos. So that's going to be really freaking cool, all aboard this one satellite. So that was a pretty exciting launch, and like I said, that happened late last year, December 26th. Also, China launched.
Yeah, December 31st of 2014 at 1:02 UTC, the Fengyun 2G launched.
Oh, look at you pronouncing that. I would not be able to do that. All right, that's a high five.
A Long March 3A that we should have some...
It's China, so this is basically all you get.
It's
there you
toxic.
go. That's
so scary. This is launched upon the pad LC2 at the Xichang Satellite Launch Center. It's a geostationary meteorological satellite, again using the Long March 3A. This is 6 out of 7 in the satellite series developed by the Shanghai Academy of Spaceflight Technology, SAST, and the China Academy of Space Technology, CAST. And more acronyms for you. It has a DCS, an SEM, as SVISR, and an SXM.
Now, can you go back to that video actually really quick? I want to show you guys something.
Yeah.
At the end of that video, there are a bunch of still images. So, all right, here's the rocket launch itself, right? So here we go. It's going. Now, that puff of smoke you see is actually toxic, basically rocket fuel. I believe that's not MMA. It's toxic fuel. It's a hypergolic fuel. So blah, blah, blah. Oh, yeah, rocket. So what's going to happen? We're going up. Now, a photographer captured these stills right here. That is the first stage coming back down. So cool. And then it lands on land like that. Now, that's just... But see that like puff of smoke in the background, that kind of weird? Yeah,
Yellow?
Don't go near that. That's
Don't
very,
go
very...
there.
Look at all the people.
Don't go there.
Don't go there. Stay away from the mask is not going to help you guys. Don't let the children touch the extremely toxic rocket engine. Please don't do this. So, lessons in rocketry, stay away from the hazardous rockets.
So scary.
When they fall back to Earth as opposed to dropping into the ocean.
So this particular satellite, in case anybody is wondering, is looking at ground, sea, and air temps along with it's coordinating imagery and also looking for early signs of solar flares.
Now that was not a reusable rocket stage. SpaceX is working on that. But Mike, someone else has announced plans to try to create a reusable rocket stage.
That's right. The French space agency, CNES, is cooperating with the German space agency to study Ariane 6 have a reusable first stage. And they're trying to, first of all, the Ariane 6 itself was spurred on because of Falcon 9's success and the fact that it was way cheaper than the Ariane 5 to launch satellites to orbit. And now that SpaceX is doing this whole reusable thing, of course they're seeing what the benefits could be to that. And so they have had a study before, but not a whole lot came of it. But this was, of course, before SpaceX entered into the game. So they're trying to do this seriously, but keep in mind that this is France and Germany independently doing this outside of the European Space Agency. So with that, especially since France kind of was the leader after all the German scientists left Europe, they might not be so tied down by a lot of the red tape that they might have with the European Space Agency. So there is a possibility that we might actually see some hardware from this study.
Well, and the key to reusability is rapid reusability, right? We're taking our rockets, we're throwing them in the ocean, but if we want to reduce the cost of space travel, we need to be able to reuse those like airplanes. Is this going to be a path towards that? Oh, he lost us, but this will hopefully be a path towards that. So
that's right. You have to have some sort of system where you are rapidly reusing and having a good flow to everything. It's not going to make business sense if you have to constantly be delaying and telling your customers, sorry, we're still refurbishing the rocket that's going to send your satellite into orbit. No, you have to have a very rapid flow and a very rapid turnaround.
Right, and that's one of the key differences between Space Shuttle and its reusability, which was more refurbishable than reusable,
right,
and say a rapid reusable rocket. Assuming anyone's ever able to make this go, keep in mind we haven't actually, no one's successfully done this yet. All right, the final news story is actually a upcoming rocket with the Space Launch System. The new engines, well, I say new engines, I mean old Space Shuttle engines being redesigned or refurbished. The RS-25 had a static fire. Check this out. Okay, it's like 4 minutes of this noise, so I'm not going to make you listen to that the whole entire time, but it is pretty awesome. This was performed January 9th. Like I said, this is RS-25 unit E0525, for those of you keeping score at home or playing home rocket test engine bingo. Well, I feel like that should be a card we should have, like, oh, this was the engine that was tested.
I was just going to say, I'm not playing, you know, I feel like I'm out of it.
I have a feeling the citizen of tomorrow is now going to make a rocket test bingo card. It has 400,000 pounds of thrust. It has an ISP of 453 seconds in a vacuum or 363 at sea level. That specific impulse. And the reason we're testing the engine, because these are the Space Shuttle main engines. Why do we need it? Well, they worked for years on the Space Shuttle. Through the entire Space Shuttle program, there's basically just one engine problem that required an abort to orbit for the Space Shuttle main engines themselves. Sure. So, I mean, these things work great. Why are we testing this again? Well, the answer is the SLS, the Space Launch System, is way, way bigger than the Space Shuttle. It uses a lot more fuel. That fuel is going to create pressure on the engine that it didn't have before. So there's a lot more force being exerted on the engine. So we need to requalify these engines for the Space Launch System in the biggerness and the batterness of SLS. So that's what's going on right here. Requaling it for SLS, it's going on for a full duration burn. Look at that thing just go, right? I mean, this is...
I was just thinking, it almost looks like a GIF. Like it just keeps going
it just
and
keeps,
going
yeah,
and going and
it's
going.
a loop. It's a loop. It's a loop. So there you go. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, comments from our last show. Stay with us. We'll be right back. And we're back. Just like that, we're back. We go in there.
There you go.
And we're back. You know, I'm going to leave that in.
Yeah, might as well.
He did that so I could cut it out.
I know.
We're going to leave it in. It's just one of those shows. All right, I'd like to thank all of the patrons of tomorrow who have helped to make this specific segment of this episode happen. These are the people who have contributed at least $3 to this episode. These are Patreon Plus subscribers. In addition to getting this episode, your name in the episode, Google Hangouts with us, which is kind of cool. You also get early access to After Dark as opposed to having to wait 4 weeks. Then we've also got our Patreon subscribers. These are people who have contributed $1 to this specific episode. So basically the cost of a cup of coffee per week. You're contributing to help continue to make a space show go week after week. So thank you to all of our Patreon subscribers. I forgot to remove the plus from that page. Oops. You can find out more information over at patreon.com/TMRO. All right, let's get started with some comments from our last show, episode 338 from the end of December, I think it was.
738?
738, yeah. Episode. We're going back in time. I built a time machine.
Apparently.
First up is Bill.
Bill Hughley says, tomorrow, the one thing about Mars One is that they make it increasingly difficult to continue to claim that hashtag nobody cares about hashtag space, hashtag NASA social.
Yeah, that's true. And so that is one of the advantages of Mars One is that they're creating a buzz around space. There is such a thing as bad advertising, by the way. I don't know where that phrase, it's like saying the customer is always right. That's not true either. So hopefully this won't be bad advertising, but right now actually it is good advertising. We're okay with it. It does make a lot of sense. So, yeah. This one comes from Quantum G on Twitter.
Quantum G says, I think it's important to remember that Elon Musk's quote-unquote plan for SpaceX completely failed. What's important is that they kept going.
It's kind of like the Silicon Valley stuff, right?
Yeah.
Where in Silicon Valley, you what is the term? Is it pivot? I think it's pivot.
Something like that.
Yeah. So you kind of come up with whatever it is, and then you switch and you move to whatever seems to be working for
Well,
you.
kind of like we were just talking the other day about Victoria's Secret. That Victoria's Secret was started so that, well, we were
All right.
talking about how the whole reason Victoria's Secret got started was because the husband of the couple decided that he wanted a place where he felt comfortable buying ladies' underwear.
And that is not what it is today.
I go, well, he failed. And I said, you're totally wrong. We looked it up, and that's exactly what it was. So yeah,
but they pivoted. They sold and pivoted.
And look what they've done. It's been amazing.
They've made it super uncomfortable for dudes to walk into Victoria's Secret.
Even more uncomfortable, I would venture to say. But SpaceX, while the original plan may have completely failed, exactly, they kept going, and what they're doing is really incredible stuff. I just equated SpaceX to Victoria's Secret. Okay.
All right.
Yes.
All right. This comes from Jupiter Fix.
It says, what kind of language will we speak on Mars if we ever get there? English or the first people there?
Probably the first people there, right? I mean, that's kind of traditionally how new colonization has gone.
All right, then we really need to beat up France. I cannot speak French to save my life.
No, it's whoever makes it there first, right? So all the more power to them.
We've had this discussion, right? Like, it's possible that France gets there, and then maybe only a year later China gets there, and maybe only a year after that SpaceX gets there, for instance. And so you might end up with these completely different factions, and there may not be a Mars government. There could be, theoretically, because
there's a flag for that. Someone made that online.
Yes, which is so cool. That you were the only inhabitants there, so you sort of have to band together because there's only like 10 of you now. But absolutely. It could be the first people there. It could be the factions sort of stay the same and they sort of just keep to themselves. Or we could maybe have a universal language. Who knows? But very interesting ideas.
Yeah. So all right, next up is Horn Hoof Records. That is not easy to say.
Nice. It says, so Ben, I would love to know if your view on Mars One has changed after the interview with Buzz.
Actually, I'll tell you the moment it changed. There was a pre-interview phone call that I did with him.
Yeah.
We were in the car driving home from the day job, and I'm on the phone with him, and it's scary late at night for him. But he's passionate about this stuff. He wants it to go.
Yeah.
So kudos for that, right? Because not a lot of CEOs would be willing to talk to a podunk video podcast,
right?
Period. Let alone do a phone call in the middle of the night and then a show on a Saturday. So all right, that was pretty cool. But then even outside of that, there was I basically, you can attest to this, I grilled him.
Oh yeah.
I wasn't mean about it, but I also I didn't pull my punches.
Right.
I did a little bit on the show because I didn't want to be that dude.
Right.
But on the phone call, I was like, I don't understand how this is going to work. This doesn't seem like this is a real thing. You're way too optimistic on this. This is not how these things work.
Right.
And he actually had answers for everything. And was willing to say certain phrases like, the timeline will probably slip. That kind of comes with the territory. I mean, I'm paraphrasing. And I changed my opinion at that point, and now I am cautiously optimistic, I think, of Mars One. I am not convinced that they can make it there, but I'm not unconvinced that they can make it there.
Right.
So I do not know, and what I'm waiting on is that plan from Lockheed, I believe it is, to come out and actually say, hey, here's what's going on.
One of the key points that he made on the phone call that I'm not entirely positive he made while on the show with us was that people have a tendency to not be able to think much further than about 10 years out.
Sure, 10 years is a really hard time frame to think.
And sure, when you think about that, I think anybody has an issue thinking about it in those terms, no matter who you are. And so that's why while the timeline itself might slip a little bit, that's why the 10-year mark kind of keeps getting thrown out there, if that makes any sense. And I could get behind that. I was like, oh yeah, no, I could see that totally. So keep moving, right?
Yeah, let's move on.
Chris Radcliffe is the next commenter saying, in regards to my last tweet, I'm actually rooting for the Mars One project to get people to Mars and prove us all wrong. I am a hopeless dreamer.
You're not hopeless, Chris.
No. You're a hopeful dreamer, as a matter of fact.
Dreamer. No, I don't think there's much wrong with that. I think blind faith is wrong. Like just saying, oh, this is going to work. I don't care about any of the facts,
Right.
they say they can do it so they can do it. That's not okay. That's not going to be a real thing. But they have some realistic data. They seem to have some money. They have the skeleton of a plan. It just needs a little bit of meat right now.
Right.
And I'm sure they're going to run into issues because you know how many times we've done this before? 0. So whoever does do this is going to run into the issues.
We've never done this before?
I know, exactly.
What?
So I think it's okay to be a hopeless dreamer on this particular topic, right? It feels like humanity's progression, next big milestone is humans on Mars. So yeah, and wanting this to happen in our lifetime, I think that's totally acceptable.
Absolutely.
And finally, the Tabasco.
The Tabasco.
It's the Tabasco.
The Tabasco says, I watched the Mars One episode. Yes, it's outlandish, but why didn't you publish contact info and where to donate like other guests?
Yeah.
Hashtag tomorrow. Hashtag rude.
Yeah, I know. It really was. That was actually, I screwed up. So, you know, I was so focused on what we were talking about and kind of trying to straddle a line of keeping people inspired and not, you know, that I forgot to mention that you can, in fact, donate to Mars One and forgot to give out additional. I do that to every guest, and I didn't to Mars One for some reason. That was not intentional.
Not intentional.
Not intentional at all. In fact, you can go to it's mars-1.com, and they have a donate tab right up there. You can get more information there. You can also search YouTube for Mars One. You get more information on Mars One and kind of their basic plans out there, as well as the video for their lander. I keep saying rover. It is a lander. It does not move. It goes thunk and lands. It's like Phoenix. So that's where you can get more information from them. Again, that was totally unintentional and no
disrespect.
No disrespect meant at all. It was just I got kind of caught up in the moment and being like, dude, Mars One.
This is really neat. Thanks. Goodbye.
All right, that is our show for this week. Thank you for joining us for Season 8. Thank you to all of the patrons who have helped contribute to make this hopefully our best season yet. This is going to be an exciting year for space travel. A lot of amazing things are going to be happening. This seems to be the word of the show is amazing. And I look forward to going on, this is going to sound cheesy. I said it in my head and I'm going to say it out loud. I look forward to going on this journey with you guys. It's going to be a lot of fun. Yeah, it will be. So
come with us to explore
tomorrow. There will be no show next week because Carrie Ann and I will be going on our yearly anniversary / birthday trip to Disney World. Wish us luck. But we will return the following week with live shows and guests I think you're going to enjoy this year. It's going to be a lot of fun. So thank you guys so much for watching. After Dark, up next.